My name is Uju Agomoh, Dr. Uju Agomoh. In terms of professional leaning, I am a lawyer. I am a criminologist. I also studied clinical psychology and sociology. And my very first work was working with the police during my National Youth Service. And it gave me a little information about what happens in security sector institutions. And from that experience and the period I was there doing my National Youth Service, I did some little research and I wanted to know more about the characteristics, what we make known as the social demographic characteristics of those we find in detention centers, in police custodies, and in prisons. And it is from the outcome of that research that I began to deepen my work on the justice sector and the security sector. And that's a little bit about me. I am a Nigerian. And I also run I work in an organization that is called the Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, PRAWA, that works on the issue of corrections and justice and access to justice and security sector reform across the continent of Africa. But we have a lot of imprint also in Nigeria and other African countries. But PRAWA is also the West African regional hub for ASSN, and I serve as the West African coordinator for ASSN, while also being a member of the executive committee of the African Security Sector Network. That's me in summary. Yes.
Thank you very much for this.
I think that my biggest dream for Africa is that continent which will be able to tap the wealth of resources that is really in this continent. And when I talk about the wealth of resources, I'm talking about both human and natural resources. That continent that will know peace. The continent that will understand that it can be developed as much as it desires, where the bulk or majority of its people will live well. That continent that will be devoid from manipulation from external forces, that continent that will be able to harness the richness that is in the continent. I think that's what it is. So it's about peace, it's about security, it's about development. And I do know that it's possible. And I also do know that we have in this continent the human capital and the natural resources to make it work. We also do have in this continent professionals that are committed who can make it work. But there are, of course, certain missing gaps. So that's my vision, that's my dream for Africa. I think it was part of one of the earlier meetings that ASSN held, and this wasn't in Nigeria, and I attended, representing PRAWA at that meeting. And this was several years back. But from one of the key things that got me very interested was the vision of ASSN to improve the knowledge, what is called the security sector reform literacy in the continent. The interest of ASSN to bridge the gap between research and practice. The interest of ASSN to get professionals across the length and breadth of the security sector was really what was very intriguing for me. So it started by being invited to attend a meeting hosted by ASSN discussing issues that are germane for the continent in this area. Okay, I think I as far back as I can remember, because as far back as I can remember, and indeed somebody was actually telling me that when I was little, you're very young, that I kept saying I was going to be a judge, he also said I was going to imprison him, and all the rest of that. But jokes apart, I think there is something about me that detests manipulation, that detests, treating those who don't have the power and capacity in a terrible way. There's something about me that doesn't like oppression. I feel that part of the reason why I am in this world is to give voice to those who don't have voice, is to be able to use whatever skill I have to the advantage of the wider population. I think that law is one of those professions. I mean, it's not the only one, but one of those professions that can enable you achieve that dream. When you look at the subject of law, you'll see that it gives you an opportunity to influence several aspects of governance, but more importantly, the issue about drafting laws, which are meant to help deal with any misgivings or any, what's the best way to capture this, but any kind of mischief that in the society you don't like. So laws are supposed to help put that to stop. So it's in about the drafting of laws or making laws. But it's not it all. It's also about the interpretations of those laws, the implementations of those laws. It is also about the monitoring of the effect of the implementations of those laws. So we all need to have rules and principles and guidance and laws. Otherwise, the whole place is going to be a mad place, So that's one thing that is unique about it. But you can see, too, from my studying of law. As a matter of fact, before I studied law, I had opportunity of studying psychology, opportunity of studying criminology, opportunity of studying sociology. So I could make those connections. And given my experience working in security sector institutions, it was easy for me to use the knowledge I got of these disciplines to make a little bit of sense out of so many things that don't make sense. And again, to be in the position to say, it's not just okay to read and learn about something and say you're all right with that, but to be able to say, if this is not good, I should be in the position to contribute to making it good, to reforming that process. And I think that these disciplines help me do that. But let me say this, it's beyond just the disciplines, because you could actually have studied anything in the world, or indeed studied nothing. It's about the commitment. It's about being able to understand what the problem is and indeed articulating the root causes of those problems. It's about identifying what the solutions to those problems are. But more importantly, it is about having the belief that these solutions can be addressed or can be made to come to bear, and making yourself as part of that solution. So I think anyone, whether you went to university or you didn't go to university, anybody who is in this continent or who loves this continent and who decides to say, I want to be part of that solution, I want to be part of the new continent of Africa, of the reform, the transformation of this continent. And that's the key. So for me, I think that's where I am. Maybe law, to some extent, made me to get a bit of that. But I just wanted to put this note of warning. It's beyond just the discipline. It's about the passion. It's about the commitment to make it work. Some of the very depressing experiences that I have gone through in this work was entering prisons in Burundi, entering prisons in Democratic Republic of Congo, and seeing the effects of what conflict can do to a nation's prison system, but also seeing the effect of our lack of focus on the issue of corrections and justice, how it can actually trigger more conflict. That is one of the stages in my life that I have come to say, no, we just must do something and continue to do something to address this. Connected to that also was how I saw Rwanda, for example, transform. I went to the prisons in Rwanda during the early days, immediately after the genocide. And I remember the experience I had in Kigali Central Prison. And it was dealing with a large number of persons who the country at that time could not even feed. They had to depend on others to do that. But how Rwanda looked within itself and adapted a strategy, which is the gachacha, which was something they looked within their own traditional system, modified it and made it to suit their terms, and were able to control that population. So again, it's saying to me that yes, these issues are things we must do something about. But these issues must be dealt with solutions that can work. I mean, there are stories on and on. There was even a particular story in Nigeria. I'd gone to a particular prison in Nigeria, and there was an inmate I met. And I asked this inmate, which was very instructive, I asked him, how many years have you been here? He gave me the number of years that he's been here, which was quite high. But by the time we looked at the case management system we had just established for that particular prison, now of course in Nigeria it's called correctional centers, I was surprised that this young man did not even know how long he had stayed. He had overstayed. At that time he was actually the longest serving awaiting trial person in that particular prison. He had stayed over 16 years. Of course, later on he came out. But my question is, without interventions like this, somebody can just be lost in the system. It is also important to understand that a lot of countries are dealing with resource constraints. And yet, we are adopting methods that are not working. There were methods that worked better before. Why are we not utilizing it? So these are some of the things. I have seen very terrible situations, but I have seen also some good stories. And I realize that the more you keep pushing and encouraging good practices, then the more we can go further in development. But this is something we must celebrate. This is something we must get more people to do. So when we have more people doing the positive things, then we are actually on the road to achieving our vision. That's what I think. Okay, I will start first by saying that the best achievement for ASSN is having ASSN. So just imagine it. To have a platform that is truly African, that recognizes the multi-sectoral relevance of professionals in the various sectors. It's not just about defense, it's not just about policing, it is also about recognizing the importance of intelligence, the importance of corrections, the importance of justice, the importance of gender, the importance of youth, and many of them. It is also about raising those things that are very important to us. The notion of national ownership, the notion of coordination, cooperation, and collaboration, building synergy. It is also about building bridges between the academia and the practice, between practitioners. For me, that's the strength. So for me, it's the formation of ASSN that is so important and so unique. But let me also say that part of, for what I have seen, that I think is the greatest, one of the successes of really having ASSN, is the fact that the word resilience. You know, there was a time where finances was a challenge for ASSN, but it stood in there, understanding that this was not about money. ASSN may stay without funds, but the vision, the mission to make Africa better was strong enough to hold us together. And when members will even commit their own resources. I mean, I could remember you do consultancy, you just want to contribute because you want this organization to stand, this network to stand the test of time. The fact that ASSN is still in existence is enough for us to celebrate, and that's why we must ensure that this dream will never really suffer. We must ensure that there are mechanisms to make sure that financial sustainability and everything that we require in ASSN happens. So that is important. When ASSN started, it was just that group. We didn't have the regional hubs. And today, we do have the regional hubs. But it's not just the regional hubs. I will tell you that from what we're doing now, you can see that we are stepping down the influence of ASSN, the impact of ASSN in the countries. And I am looking forward to that day where every member country of the AU will experience this move at the national level. But we don't stop at the national level, but even the local level in that country. Because the knowledge of SR and the message of SSR and security sector governance and transformation is a message for everyone. It's a message that the whole of the society, not just the whole of government, should go with. It is the whole of society because peace and security is so important that we cannot trivialize it. You cannot leave it only for those who are wearing uniform. And I'm coming back to the issue of the civil society. It must be what everyone must key into. It's supposed to be a corporate responsibility. It's supposed to be a collective responsibility. It's supposed to be something the private sector will invest in. It's supposed to be something the public sector will invest in. It's supposed to be something the voluntary sector will invest in. So, for me, that's something I really love, okay? And today we're talking about frameworks. Security sector policy frameworks. With ASSN, just think about it. Would we have how far would we have talked about it in terms of the AU? How far would we have indeed talked about it in terms of ECOWAS? Just think about it. But with the kind of way ASSN works, it does not just come and talk about policy in terms of a piece of document, because that document, if you do nothing with that document, it's going to be there. But ASSN believes that we need to take this in the way and chunks that the people can understand. Sensitize people, get them to drive it, own it, and apply it as it may suit their context. So it is this creativity, it is this relevance, it is this bridge building, it is this resilience that I think that ASSN should celebrate and celebrate more. I can just say the little bits and bits. So let me take somebody like Professor Sibo. And when I look at him, I kind of wondered, somebody like him, many would have by now, gone to her peace, to retire. I mean, by the way, what is he looking for at his age? But you see, he's not tired. He's there mentoring, he's there supporting, and I know how many times in virtual meetings and all of that. I know his passion. I know his dream around this. So for me, seeing this in ASSN is how do I put it? It's such an encouragement that I ask myself, if Professor Sibo is still here doing this, who am I? Who am I not to? I don't know whether you get my drift. So he has impacted so much. He is still impacting, and he's not tired. He's adapting, okay? He's adapting his impact and work to what, circumstances of demand. But the important thing you cannot take away from him is that he's not tired. He's still committed. He's still committed to the agenda of Africa. Now, should I take somebody like Fumi? Look at, in those days, and when I look at Fumi and I see how far she's gone, and I'm like, wow. Look at the kind of things she's did in Kenya, in what she's doing in King's College, and how the work that she's doing, bringing women to leadership and encouraging people into that field. So I'm encouraged. And I can go on and on and on and on and on. You look at the Niagalis, you look at, I can go on. I can go on. Or do we talk about the likes of Sandy Africa, of those, or Nisha, and so many. So for me, what I see in ASSN is a bundle of professionals that are committed to this fight. I should not even ignore the lives of a gentleman called Elle and a gentle lady called Jane. Oh my God. One of the things, and I would ask this, a lot of times there are people, young people, who will not want to work in a place where they're not sure of what their salary will be next day. You know it. There were times you didn't have a salary. There was a time. How many could still stay on? And for me to look back and see, for me, you are asking me about the source of your ASSN. You are part of the source, you, Jane, that you could stand, and I believe that there is a need to bring a lot of the young people, irrespective of whether there's resources or not, but begin to build that culture of the new generation that will sustain and sustain beyond. So I haven't answered you directly, but to say to you, it's a mixture of people with passion, a mixture of people with content, knowledge, a mixture of people who do not only speak of what they know, but actually are not tired of making their own time count. They are not tired of getting their hands dirty in doing the work. So, ASSN is actually action people. I see it on 3 points. So my first is about financial sustainability. Yeah? And that first is also somehow connected to the second. So we need to have ASSN in a form that its resources will not be dependent on whether, or its activities will not be dependent on whether there is a donor that gives or not. So in other words, there must be a mechanism that will guarantee a certain percentage of that fund, especially to cover some concrete strategic interventions, irrespective of what is happening in terms of whether external people are given or not. So we need to find a way that will happen. In Sena's climes, one would expect that the African Union will expect that the Regional Economic Commission, the ECOWAS, and all the other RECs will be able to, commit to a little percentage to support organizations such as ASSN doing work to enhance their work. It makes sense. So again, number 1 is about financial sustainability. Number 2, it's about ensuring that the scope, the reach of the work of ASSN. So look at what we're doing here. So we have taken 6 countries here working with ECOWAS in partnership, 6 countries of ECOWAS, and we're trying to step down this training on the ECOWAS policy framework. Yeah? But how many countries are in ECOWAS? So you will imagine that if ASSN has the ability to be in all of these countries, it's not just, this is just ECOWAS, we're not talking only about ECOWAS, we're talking about everywhere. Do that in the Eastern African, do that in Southern Africa, so that the structure that we're able to keep will become that kind of structure that everyone cannot resist having the transformation. And it must be a transformation that is driven, supported, coordinated, owned by the people, everyone. Not just owned by those wearing uniform, not just owned by the executive arm of the government, but including the parliament, including the judiciary, including all the sector, recognizing that they must fight to ensure that the message of SSR, the message of security sector governance and transformation is a message that all of them will key into and make happen. The third and the last thing I believe that ASSN should be able to move into is actually being consistently on the agenda setting sphere. So how do we ensure that we drive the agenda? And having driven that agenda or contributing or setting that agenda, that you are also ensuring that the necessary linkages that need to happen with key institutions of governance in the continent, but also with academic institutions in terms of the new leaders concept are also keyed into that. So here is also looking at sustainability from a different dimension that is not financial. But that sustainability that recognizes that agenda setting becomes something that will continue and that the relevant institutions key in to be able to either drive it, support it, or learn about it. So that this approach will become the standard approach, the default approach going forward across the continent. First, I just want these regional hubs to get stronger, so that there will be ability to enable the regional hubs drive the deepening of the impact of ASSN across the countries that are within the ASSN. So I want to see a little bit more of that. It will also be good to find a mechanism that at least can guarantee certain levels of financial sustainability. I mean, I'm not saying 100%, but certain levels of it, so that we know that this organization ASSN have come to stay. We want it to stay. We don't want a situation where tomorrow, for one challenge or the other. So it's important to make sure that that happens. And then finally, we have the policy frameworks across that we could, as a continent and as sub-regions, we see how do we use that as an entry point, entry point to begin to engage. So whether that or whether other means, but just definitely look for easy processes for good entry point to help deepen the engagement at the national level and the sub-national level, because that is actually where they matter. That's where it ends. So when you have conflict, these conflicts are internal to those countries. So in other words, to be able to change the narrative and really transform the security sector, we need to do more in terms of the country-specific interventions and get the countries to understand that this is about us and this is indeed about them, and they must adopt approaches that will help meet the ultimate goal, and definitely that ASSN is there to help them, to be there to support them, and is committed as an African institution to have the continent have the best that it can have.